I want to set the context because this was so long ago. In the 1960s, what was KL like then?
Well, the Bannon Bailey, the office was actually, at that time we called it Mountbatten Road. It was the bridge and the office. That was very near to the courts. The courts was where the clock tower is, the Padang. And the lower courts were where Maybank headquarters is now. That was called Court Hill. So we were actually quite well placed because we could actually walk to the High Court or to low courts. But it was small then because I think that maybe few hundred lawyers only at a time. There were still some British lawyers around. Of course, Bannon Bailey, Skrine and Company, Shern Delamore, Lovelace and Hastings. They still had, before they phased out, the Chief Justice was still Lord Thompson. Thompson was the Chief Justice. It was a very, should I say, quite relaxed practice those days. You could actually take a stroll up the Court Hill, chit-chat with people, do your case, have a coffee there, stroll back. The reason, because you didn't have faxes, you didn't have telexes. The firm had a lot of clients, which was agency houses for British companies or Australian companies. How you advise a client is through letters, correspondence. So it may take 1 week for the letter to go to England. They take some time to look at it. They will send you back another letter, another week. So you actually probably have 3 weeks to do something. So in that sense, it was quite relaxed. But of course, there were crises, all the time. And so when that happened, of course, things got very busy.
Was there a reason why you started your career in debt collection?
Those days, if you started as an assistant, they always give you debt collection to do. There was no specialization or anything. And we had to run up the courts to do mentions and et cetera, et cetera. So it's basically debt collection. But from debt collection, you do learn about bankruptcy, winding up, how to enforce a judgment and stuff like that. And you drift from that. Then slowly you start doing advisory work, pass you a file to look at the law and give him some opinion. But it was a matter of really, those days, some people just like to be a litigator and some people didn't want to be a litigator. So you just move on that way. And I think you just learn the subject as you go along through practice. It was nothing sophisticated, specializing, go to courses. And I think that the people were good at it. The reason why I ended up the way I did was I started by doing litigation. But I found that the cases always got postponed. You prepare a case and then you get postponed. I found that it's easier to do commercial work and advisory work. And he said at that time that we were very lucky because Skrine and Company and Shern Delamore are the two firms that had a lot of work from international companies, the British companies, Australian or whatever. I suppose because there were British partners there. So we had a lot of that sort of work. By assisting them, I also had a lot of work with British banks, insurance companies, tin companies, and stuff like that. From there, you just end up doing more banking work, more insurance work. You just end up that way. Because in the end, you don't have enough time to do something else anyway, right? So you have to do that.
So you mentioned this before that Bannon Bailey dissolved in 1963, and on 1st May, Skrine & Co. came about. Do you remember much about this period, why this happened, and how you end up going with John Skrine and 2 others to form this new firm?
Well, there were 4 partners in Bannon Bailey, and 3 of them disapproved of what the 4th partner did. They were very secretive, I think, quite rightly, confidential. They didn't tell us what it was about. They explained to us that they were dissolving the firm, a partnership, and both sides, they asked me to join them. But I thought that John Skrine was a lawyer that I like to follow rather than the other one. So I agreed to go with him.
What was it about John Skrine that made you feel like you wanted to be like him?
I think his integrity, his ethics, his hardworking, always very conscientious, and a very nice person, actually a God-fearing type of person. I think you had some confidence in him. He took everything seriously. They used to say that he was a great polo player and he used to take his work to the field. And in between, they call it chakkas, he would do his work, always working. And the trouble with him was because he was so busy, he was actually a person he didn't have much time for you. If I'll go and see him and say, hey, John, I've got a problem, can you talk about it? And he just give you you could see that he doesn't really want to talk to you, and so you get the hint and you go off. But Stanley Petty was different. He was so patient. You can sit down with him and talk to him for 1 hour, your problem, he listened to you. So I think we had that great advantage that we were able to consult very senior lawyers, as young people.
And wasn't John Skrine known for saying, don't harbor a grudge, life is too short for that?
He was always telling me that whenever you have grudges or quarrel with people, life is too short. Forget it. Get on with life. And I thought that a very good philosophy. And you see, after he retired, I found out that he got cancer. He was in Ireland then, and he didn't have long to live, 3 months. So I decided to go and see him. I took the trip to Ireland and see him there. And at that time, he decided not to have any chemo. He decided that whatever time he had left, he should tidy up all his affairs and do what he had to do. Because chemo tends to knock you out. You can't do much if you have chemo. So he stopped all that. He didn't do that at all. But when I met him, which is about 3 months before his death, he was still okay. He showed me around. We talked about the firm and so on. But he was still worrying about the firm. He was still talking to me about the firm, what should happen. That sort of man.
Wow. Are there moments with John Skrine that stood out for you that was very meaningful?
Well, I think that's the time I spent with him before his death in Ireland. He was, of course, very sorry when I left Skrine and Company. He was very sad about that, but I won't go into that, the reason why. But he was very unhappy that I was leaving Skrine and Company. But I'm very sorry for that as well, because it made him very sad. But I think Peter Mooney, who stayed back with Skrine and Company, was more understanding. I think he realized what was going on.
Yeah, Peter Mooney was a concert pianist as well.
Yes, Peter Mooney, of course, as you know, continued to live in Malaysia until his death, right? And he's still involved in the law and everything. One of the brightest minds that I met. He's intellectually very sharp, and even when he was 90, still intellectually very sharp. And like John Skrine, very charitable. He gave his house to his manservant. He educated the two sons of his servant. One became another top lawyer. Wonderful person.
So Skrine & Co., within 2 years, you were partner with Alex, your brother, and also Tun Hussein One, who later became Prime Minister. Were they also the same pupil batch as you as well?
Yes. I mean, Hussein One actually had a room just next to me. I must say, I never expected him to be Prime Minister. And I must say that if anybody became a Prime Minister because it was given to him, I think that's a case. It was actually given to him. I don't think Hussein was the person who looked for it. No, he was not ambitious that way. But I think when a nation needed him, they asked him to do it, and he did it. He certainly wasn't the type of fiery politician that you see today. Nice man as well, and very much a person of integrity.
Any particularly memorable incidents?
He was so cautious, and he would always underline his notes. I still remember once there was some land office matter when I thought it was in Johor. And since he was very well connected in Johor, I wanted him to speak to the district officer about the matter. And, he won't do it. He won't do it. He will not use his influence. So that type of person, even for me, he wanted to do it. He said, no, I can't use my influence at all. My brother Alex was also in the firm with me. Alex was a live wire. He was involved in all kinds of things. And eventually he was persuaded by Tan Siew Sin to join MCA. And so even when he was in the firm, he was very much involved with MCA and politics, but tremendous networker. A lot of people liked him. A lot of clients liked him. He would be multitasking type of person. But later on, I think he fell out with Siew Sin, and he left with a group of young people from MCA, and they joined Gerakan. So he didn't stay too long as a lawyer.
So you mentioned Tan Siew Sin, and this was around the time when there was the 13th May 1969 racial riot. What do you remember of it?
Well, I think I mentioned that my little brush at politics when after May 13 got a whole lot of young English educated people to support MCA and do something for the country. And I remember that, we used to meet him, and he was, of course, telling us, look, you chaps, you got to do something for the country. You can't stay out of politics. But I just found actually a note which my brother Alex made at the time. And one of the questions that we did ask Siew Sin at that time was, if we enter politics, will it make any difference? Do the Malays really want a Malaysian Malaysia, or they want it to be a Malay country? Because if it's a Malay country that they want, it's very difficult for us to enter politics. And as you know, what's happened since then, right? So yes, questions were already asked at the time after May 13th, whether really the Malays wanted a Malaysian Malaysia or they want Malay Malaysia. So it's very difficult for MCA to play a role, I think, in that kind of situation. And that's why we never joined MCA.
And wasn't it quite a dangerous time as well, just in terms of what you could say? Otherwise, you could be charged with sedition.
Oh, yes. I mean, we had to be very careful what we're saying and who's going to leak out because after May 13th, of course, there was the emergency and I think the special branch was all over the place.
Were you ever in fear for your life, especially since your brother had decided to enter into politics?
No, not myself because I didn't go into politics, but I think, yes, Alex would be. In politics, there are also a lot of gangsters. So there's always a danger of that.
So you were at Skrine & Co this whole time, and then you were also quite active outside of the law because you were in the Royal Selangor Golf Club as well. How did that come into your life?
That had actually been a big part of my life. When I first came back, I was a tennis player and joined a golf club. I was playing tennis. And I did play for the country once in the Asian Games, tennis. But then later on, I switched to golf and I just fell in love with the game and got involved in the club. And I became captain of the club at a very early age. At 34, I was a captain of the club. And I was in the committee for about 14 years in the club. But then from there, I got involved internationally with the International Golf Associations also. And then my life has been involved in Asia, Pacific, as well as Malaysian golf. I was president of the Malaysian Golf Association for 17 years, member of the committee for 30 years. And the Asia Pacific golf, I've been there for God knows long time. And so that has been a wonderful part of my life in the sense of meeting a lot of nice people. And I've also traveled a lot. I'm a member of the RNA St. Andrews. I'm also a member of Pine Valley in the US. I've been to Augusta, which everybody knows about. So that part of my life, which I don't regret spending, I think. In a way, I regret that I gave my time there because I didn't spend any time with the Bar Council or my legal profession. Yeah, I didn't do that. I should have, I think.
But even so, you were still exposed and meeting very interesting people, at least through your father as well, right? You met, I believe, Tunku Abdul Rahman. What was he like in person?
I met Tunku when I was a young person with my father. Then later in life, when I was president of the Golf Association, I met him again because he also loved golf. And all I can say is he was a wonderful man. He was very warm, very humorous, very kind. I know some people say that he could be quite ruthless in politics, but I still think that he had a good heart. I think he did things for the right reasons. I believe that he did believe in a Malaysian Malaysia. I think he did. I think being a Malay, I mean, you can't help it, but he did try to be fair to the other races as well. He did. And I think he was a bit swept away by the very pro-Malay politicians. But I think he did believe in a Malaysian Malaysia. I still remember him saying at independence that I'm the happiest prime minister in the world.
And you also met Tun Dr Ismail as well. What was he like in person?
Tun Dr Ismail, I actually played a golf match against him.
Did you win?
Yes, I did. And I was very afraid of that. But he was a formidable person and he tolerated no nonsense from anybody. But again, followed the law, very fair. He was tough on anybody who broke the law. But as I said, being a Malay, you have to be pro-Malay, right? So you got to understand that. But still, I think it's a pity he died young. I think he would have played a very important part of this for this country if he'd been alive.
And then 1993, that's when Lee Hishammuddin was formed. How do you end up being involved in the setting up of Lee Hishammuddin?
No, I left Skrine & Company, and it so happened that some of the younger lawyers at the time decided to leave Skrine & Company as well, and they asked me to join them. So I said, okay. And it's been very good for me. Usually when you do something new, there's always a lot of new energy and everything new, and everybody's enthusiastic. It's nice to be involved in that sort of situation.
What do you remember of those early days, the challenges and the highlights of setting up a brand new firm?
Well, I still remember it happened when the computer just came in. I didn't know how to use a computer. I had to be taught how to do it. None of us had any secretaries and just a few staff. We were all partners at the time. They all had to do their own things, but a lot of enthusiasm. And I think that because the partners were good lawyers and were hardworking, they managed to make it work. I mean, for example, I don't think we had to go for overdrafts to start off. But even in Skrine and Company, they start off with overdraft, when they left Skrine and Company, the partners had to borrow money to start it off. But I think in Lee Hishammuddin, we didn't. We were fairly fluid at the time.
How did you manage it then? I imagine, especially for anyone who wants to start a new law firm now, that is amazing to be able to not have to suffer without overdraft. You also were managing to make enough money to survive almost immediately as well.
That's why I think we're lucky, because I must say, I think that we brought quite a few clients over with us. So I think that helped. I think that helped. I think what also helped, in a downturn in the economy, you're lucky if you have litigation, good litigators, because there's always litigation in a downturn. Right? Even now you can see there's a lot of litigation going on. When the conveyancing and the commercial work drops, the litigation is what keeps you going. I think that's what happened to us in Lee Hishammuddin in the early days. The litigators did very well.
And then eventually there was a merger with Allen Gledhill in 2005. Could you share a bit about how that happened in your memories of that period?
Well, I think how it happened is that some of the partners were very friendly with the partners in Lee Hishammuddin Allen Gledhill. I think that's how it happened. I think it was these partners that wanted to expand each other's firms, and that's how it happened. But it's always not easy for two firms to merge, because maybe the culture is a bit different. People see things differently, and it takes time for it to actually merge properly. So luckily it did work out. Yeah. Although some people did leave, not everybody stayed on.
But having gone through that experience, do you have any advice for people considering merging? What are the things to look out for?
Well, my advice is be ready for problems. There'll always be problems in a merger, There'll be some people unhappy, some people happy. And then you need good leadership to put it all together.
And looking back, clearly you've had such an incredible legal career. You were, as I understand it, also invited twice to join the judiciary, including the Court of Appeals. Do you regret not accepting it?
Well, the first time I was asked was to be a high court judge. And at that time, it was very early days in my career. I didn't particularly feel that I wanted to leave the profession. But the second time, when I was actually asked to go on the Court of Appeal, at that time, I realized that I don't think the bench is the life I want. It's got its own discipline, and I'm too independent for that. I don't belong with that fraternity. Never been part of the fraternity. And of course, I knew that my good friend Tun Hamid, who at that time was the Chief Justice, was due to retire, and his successor was going to be Yusof Chin, who I didn't know at all. That was another reason why I didn't take it on.
Did you ever feel pressured by your father's legacy? Because he clearly had such a huge hand in how your entire life and even career unfolded.
My father was a person that I respect greatly, because he was a man of integrity, and I don't think he ever took a bribe or anything. In fact, I remember that, the custom of Malaysians to give gifts, presents for people. He would always tell the servants, anybody sends gifts to a house, turn them away. He'd always say that. But having said that, not easy person to get on with. He was very strong-minded and stubborn, can be very fierce. He was what I call the old type of father, the patriarch, strong, not emotional, keeps his distance from his children. Although he loves them, he loves his children, but he will never show any emotion or affection, that type of person. But, he took us through the war, all the problems he shouldered. And I'm very grateful to him because of his name and everything. I think it made life much easier for me at the beginning of my career. He opened doors for me. People knew him, so they treated me well because of that. And it was a big advantage to have a father like him. He was a funny fella. I mean, for example, he was a golfer. I'm a golfer, but we never played golf together. He never asked me to play golf with him.
Did you never feel like you could ask him?
I mean, there were times Cameron Highlands together when I did play with him, but in Kuala Lumpur, he had his own friends, you see. He preferred to play with his friends. Right? He used to go, for example, to Taiwan to play golf with his friends, but he never asked me to go with him. By the way, I must say something about my father, which might correct the impression. He was actually a very sociable person with his friends. He had a lot of parties with his friends. He gave a lot of dinners, a good drinker, enjoyed his drinks. very sociable with his friends. And I think a lot of his friends remember him that way, that they think he was a great person, a great friend to have. Most of them will remember him very well.
And knowing what you know now, is there anything that you wish you could redo in your life?
Well, it's difficult. I don't compare myself. I think mentioned to you some people who've done a lot for the country as lawyers, Kapal Singh or people like that who really stuck their necks out. I remember Raja Aziz at a time when the judges were sacked, when Saleh Abbas was sacked, told me that he refused to go before some of the judges because he just didn't want to, because he felt that they didn't have the integrity for him to. So he didn't go before some people. And it's different type of practice in the sense that he never wanted a partnership because he told me that partners give you problem, which is true. Partners do give you a problem, right? So he preferred to be a one-man show. And of course, he was a barrister. People brief him and he doesn't really need a lot of people. But he preferred life that way. But the thing is, if you choose to practice that way, then of course the practice dies with you. It dies with you. You have no successor. There's nobody to buy over your firm where you die. So you must understand it. But some people choose that way. But a great man of integrity. And of course, Kapal Singh, I think throughout his life fought for justice. And even though he was always at the losing end, but still he continued to do it. Yeah, I admire people like that. I think I mentioned also Tun Sofyan, I think was a man of great integrity and humility as well.
So I suppose there's nothing that you actually want to redo in your own life then?
No, I mean, not really. I mean, I just feel that one thing I would like to tell people always is that now at this stage of my life, I think friends are very important. Friends are very important to you. And time is always passing. Don't think that you have time on your hands. Time could be very short. You never know. So enjoy yourself and really do the things that you want to do and treasure all the good times you have with people and what you do together, and die with a clear conscience.
Well, Tommy, thank you so much for this amazing interview. I normally love to end all of them with some questions. So the first one is this: do you feel like you have found your why?
I'm still looking for the meaning of life.
And what kind of legacy would you hope to have left behind?
Well, I just hope that I've been a good father and a husband to my children and my wife, and hopefully they'll think well of me and also my partners as well. I value their opinions. I feel very much that young people do need guidance, but in a way, it would be good if I could talk to people and exchange ideas and so on and so on. I'm not doing legal work much now, so it's more the guidance and be able to engage with people and see how they're thinking and also help them with their thinking. I think that's something which is worthwhile doing.
Are there particular areas of interest that you would be keen to talk with people on?
I think what the most important thing is how you think. It's not so much a subject, it's the way you think, you develop, read books, read things like that, and get the big picture. What is the big picture out there?
And what do you think are the most important qualities of a successful person?
Well, I suppose it depends what you mean by a successful person.
How would you define successful then?
I would say that a successful person is somebody that you respect, that you look up to, whatever. He may not be very rich, but because of his wisdom or his integrity or what he's done in life, I would say it's a successful person. A lot of very rich people I don't respect. There are a lot of Tan Sris or Datos I don't respect. Doesn't mean a thing to me. You might say they're successful, but I wouldn't, not in my mind.
So what do you think the important qualities of a successful person based on your definition would be?
Well, I suppose a successful person must be somebody who's kind and actually does things for people. You serve people, you're not a crook, you're not cheating. And if you have wealth, you actually earn it. You don't cheat people for it. You're an honest person.
And is there anything else you'd like to share that we haven't covered yet?
I would like to say, maybe at the end of this, how sad it is for me that when I saw the country at the independence, the energy, the multiracial atmosphere and appointments, how people go on with each other, it's just sad that after 60 years or so, we're actually at a situation where people are gloomy. There was a lot of times during the 60 years where we had worry. After May 13th, there's a lot of worry. The Vietnam War, There was a lot of worry. A lot of people thought the communists would come down from Vietnam, take over this country. And then there have been recessions. A lot of people have migrated as well. So it's just sad that this country, which had so much promise and independence, very rich country, second richest in Asia, I think it just slipped so badly because of the politics, the way people divided. That's very sad to me. And it's also sad to me that you wonder when we will ever get better.
I imagine there are a lot of young people who also feel that sadness as well, and also feel powerless, thinking, who am I? What can I do? One person can't change anything. Do you have any advice for them?
I think the future is with young people for sure in this country, right? It's a young people's world, and I think how they will take charge. I have a lot of respect for young people. They're very bright, but I just wonder sometimes that, well, they're too spoiled to really deal with problems. But let's hope not. When I look back at my life when I was young, maybe I also didn't listen to old people much. In the club, when I was a captain at age 34, I don't know how I did it because there were a lot of much more qualified and older people, but they accepted me as captain. But I really wish that I had talked more to the older people in the club. The members were in the 60 years old, 50, 70. I really wish I had talked to them more because I think I would have been much smarter and more learned if I had listened to them. But when you're young, you're full of yourself, you think you don't need to listen to anybody. But life is such that it repeats itself because what I see now at my age, I can see exactly what happened to these people when I was young. The same views that I have, they had also. So it's a wisdom that repeats itself. And if you're young and you are smart, you will listen to older people. Because eventually, when you get to that age, you will realize that what they said was true. For example, as time passes and it doesn't wait for anybody. So do things. You might think that you have all the time in the world, but actually you don't have. I have sadly, so many good friends who passed away young, 50 years old, 60 years old, passed away. And so you never know when your time's up, and just make sure that you live a good life.